Hi, everybody, and welcome to our Council District 11 mobility discussion, not debate, because unfortunately the incumbent didn't respond. But we're so excited to have Faizah Malik here, who is running for CD11. Before we get to our conversation with Faizah, as usual, we're going to give a little bit of context and history. We'll then have Faizah. These timings were for a debate, so if you take more than a minute, we're not going to stop you. But generally, 1 minute for an opening statement, 1 minute at the end for a closing statement. We'll do about 25 minutes of curated questions from the Streets for All Steering Committee, and then open it up to audience Q&A. And you can go to that link up top, which we'll also put in the chat, and ask questions for Faizah and vote on other people's questions. So I apologize if you've been to our debates before and you've seen these stats and you're sick of hearing about them, but they bear repeating. Um, it's really expensive to live the way we live, and because people are stuck in gridlock, it costs our economy an estimated $19 billion a year in lost productivity. There was a study done a few years ago on, I believe it was the 5 freeway near downtown, and they studied this, and incidents of domestic violence go up by 9% on the worst traffic days. So we're literally so stressed out, we're taking it out in horrible ways when we get home. Our air is terrible. You smoke up to 4 cigarettes per day just by breathing here in LA. We have the worst in the nation year-round ozone emissions, fifth worst particle pollution, one of the highest rates of childhood asthma in the country. The average bus goes about 11 miles per hour. That's about the same as a cyclist. And obviously, buses are so much more efficient than cars. The most amazing stat when I started Streets for All blew my mind was 2/3 of all trips made inside the city of LA are less than 5 miles. Half are less than 3 miles. So everyone says, oh, LA is too big. You just have to have a car. But actually, the majority of trips every day are done much more locally and near people's homes. So when you add all this up, we're ripe for change. We're making great transit investments in metro and et cetera, but we're not there yet, and we want to see a much more multimodal city, better air, safer, and much more efficient public transportation. So specific to CD11, obviously the west side, basically everything west of the 405, Brentwood, Del Rey, Mar Vista, Marina Del Rey. Actually, that's a typo. Marina Del Rey is not part of the city of LA. It's the county. The Palisades, Playa del Rey, Playa Vista, Venice, West LA, and Westchester. Um, since Vision Zero was announced a little more than 10 years ago, 114 people have been killed. Those are those dots on the map. And most major arterials in CD11 are on the high injury network. These are the 6% of streets that cause 70% of injuries and deaths. So we think there's a lot of room for improvement here. We don't want to just pay lip service to Vision Zero. We want to see real change. And so we're excited to have a conversation tonight about it. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Faizah. I'll put the timer on, but again, Faizah, if you need a few more seconds or even a minute, don't worry about it, given it's just a discussion. And whenever you're ready, feel free.
Sure. Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Faizah Malik, and I am running for LA City Council District 11. As a little bit of bio background about me, I am a mom. I have two little kids. I have a 9-year-old and an almost 7-year-old. I am a renter here in Venice. I was born and raised here in Southern California. I was born in the South Bay and grew up in Orange County before spending college and law school on the East Coast and then moving back here in 2017. I've been a housing and civil rights lawyer for the past 15 years. I've been at Public Counsel now, which is a large legal aid organization, almost 8 years. And I'm running now for LA City Council District 11 after spending my career advocating for affordable housing and renter protections, a more equitable city, because I think the West Side deserves leadership that invests in our communities, that invests in affordable housing, that invests in transit, that invests in the neighborhood walkability and safe streets and the things that actually create safety and community cohesion and connected communities that we all deserve. And I think we're seeing a lot of fragility in our democracy at the federal and level. And I do think that our local government is where the rubber meets the road. And I think it's really important that CD11 have that kind of leadership that's courageous, fights for the things we actually need, for the investments we need to meet our climate goals, to meet our housing goals, to meet our goals, to make this a place where everybody has the opportunity to thrive. And I do not believe our current council member aligns with those goals at all and is actually actively undermining those goals in a lot of ways. And that's why I decided to take this step to take her on, even though she's an incumbent. And I'm really proud of the campaign we've been building, and I really appreciate being here at Streets for All tonight to talk about our aligned goals.
Thank you so much.
Mhm.
All right, I'm going to turn it over to Josh for our first question. First question.
Thanks. Good evening, everyone. So our first question is about charter reform. I've been sitting in a lot of these meetings and it's been taking up a lot of my time, and it's a very slow, tedious, kind of opaque process for anyone else that's been spending time with it. But it's really, really important for anyone that doesn't know. The charter is like it's like the founding document of the city, and it pretty much sets the base rules that the rest of the city operates on. And there's an opportunity to change it. So right now the city is going through a process to create a ballot measure to revise our charter. The first time we've done so in 25 years. Specific to transportation and infrastructure, Streets for All has put together a charter reform platform that consists of 4 pillars. 1, give LADOT ownership in repaving and sidewalks. 2, because streets are the largest public space in LA, we think they should have a dedicated funding source in the budget as a percent of property tax revenues like parks. 3, we support changing the city to a 2-year budget cycle with a 5-year capital improvement plan. And 4, we think the Board of Public Works should be replaced with a director position like other departments. And so that was a lot, but how do you think the charter needs to change to improve our transportation and infrastructure goals as a city?
I absolutely believe and agree with you about the importance of charter reform. I used to work for the New York City Council before I moved back here to Los Angeles in 2017. I worked on housing and transportation law, and so I feel like I got a really great inside look at how the largest city in the country operated, and then now being back in Los Angeles, seeing the second largest city operate, and I see a lot of problems that go back to the city charter. And so I appreciate and really align with the Streets for All proposals. I do think we need to consolidate our management and oversight over our streets. I really like the proposal you've put forward about LADOT being that agency. I'm not sure where the Charter Reform Commission is going to end up, but I think LADOT is the more innovative agency that we have. They're implementing all of the our current transportation projects around the city. I also think that we need a dedicated budget stream for street safety, for street improvements. We are seeing now, of course, like after the rains, all these potholes, and we're seeing the city not doing the street repaving it needs to do. And we desperately need dedicated money for our streets that's not actually subject to being on the chopping block every year in our budget. And so, as a council member, I will fight for that. And I agree with the 2-year budget cycle. I agree with the capital improvement program. And I definitely think that under our Board of Public Works that there is a lack of accountability and no direction of who's in charge. And so those are generally speaking the things that we need to move forward through this charter reform process. And I'm really glad Streets for All is advocating for it.
Thank you. I think over to you, Michael.
Yeah. So, talking about the city budget, the city's budget has been decimated by a combination of slower tax revenues, raises to LAPD and FD and civil servants without a plan to pay for them, and ever-increasing lawsuit settlements and overspending by the city attorney and LAPD. As a result, budget allocation departments to departments like LADOT, Streets LA, and the Bureau of Engineering have been cut to the bone. Today, if you report a broken sidewalk, it will take about 10 years to fix it. A broken streetlight takes about 2 years, a pothole could take a year, and a speed hump request could be multiple years to never. Our pavement condition index is at 60 and expected to decrease 4% next year to 56. At this rate, we will pay out more in lawsuit settlements to people hurt on our streets and sidewalks than we spend fixing them. So the question is, how do we properly fund our streets and sidewalks so our city is not deteriorating faster than we can fix it? As council member, what would you do to fix the situation?
Yeah, I mean, I think we were just going on their charter reform question, kind of naming that exact thing. I think in the long run, it's costing us more money in liability by not fixing our streets. And then the longer we wait to not invest in our streets and sidewalks, the more expensive it's going to be in the future. And so we do need to really take this seriously. We do need to cut those liability costs. And we need to focus on the dedicated revenue stream, as we were saying, for our streets and sidewalks. It should be non-negotiable. It's literally the most important thing everybody notices. I did Ciclavia on Venice Boulevard this year, and someone biking by during Ciclavia said, "We'll vote for the person who fixes our streets," literally. And I think it's that critical. And so, as council member, I will fight to make sure we are not cutting our street budget. I will also, I think as a city, we need to do more coordinated planning. And so really kind of thinking creatively about harnessing um, our neighbors' transportation networks through Culver City or Santa Monica. And so doing more coordination among our region so we can harness more money, obviously with Metro. But ultimately, we do need to raise revenue. And so I'm really interested in big bonding measures. I think maybe an infrastructure bond. How can we do need to get the money fast to allocate the budget now. It's just not tenable the way we've been handling it, as for all the reasons you were saying.
Thank you. I think I have the next one as well. So this is about Measure HLA. It passed in 2024 with 2/3 of the vote, and for the first time in LA history, we're mandating that the city implement things like bike lanes, bus lanes, and pedestrian improvements every time it repairs and works on streets. Unfortunately, despite the overwhelming result, the city has been slow to implement
What?
Measure HLA, and
No,
city
I'm
depart.
listening to Streets for All, like
Um,
Q&A or
sorry about that. As a result, or despite the overwhelming result, the city has been slow to implement Measure HLA, and city departments have mostly slow walked or even tried to sidestep implementation. The question is, did you vote for Measure HLA last year? Um, will you force reluctant city bureaucracy to implement the city's mobility plan? And do you believe Measure HLA should apply to metro projects on LA city streets?
So to answer the first question, I did vote yes on Measure HLA. So thank you for your advocacy around that. I think we must force the city to implement the city's mobility plan for all of the budgetary reasons we were just talking about. We need to make these investments. These are also the investments beyond safety. It creates good quality of life for everybody. And so I want to see our mobility plan implemented. And I think it is really disappointing to see the city blame HLA for its own failures and lack of ability to just fix its streets. And so I'm committed to actually fighting for the investments that we need to implement it, figuring out a way around the ADA issues and that are coming up. But we have to move forward with it, and we need the money for it. Um, and on the last one, I think I'm interested in knowing more about how HLA can be coordinated with metro projects. I think offhand, I think it would make sense for there to be that kind of coordination for metro projects because otherwise, how we don't want Metro would be doing the project and it's not like actually integrated into our mobility plan. So it kind of makes like logical sense to me, although I want to know more. And again, thank you for your advocacy.
Thanks. Over to Josh for the next question. You might see the screen share go off for a second. I'm trying to fix the Q&A, but aware it's not working. So over to you, Josh.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Good luck on that. All right, so as we all know, the cost of housing is far too high in Los Angeles. 59% of Angelenos are rent burdened, meaning they're spending more than 30% of their income on rent, and more than a quarter of Angelenos spend more than half of their income on rent. This year, we sponsored SB 79. It was a bill designed to encourage denser housing around transit. And while it's an important bill, it's not enough, and there remain significant barriers to building the magnitude of new housing we need in LA to truly bring down the costs of rent. So first, what do you think of SB 9? Do you support it? And how would you solve the housing affordability crisis in Los Angeles and bring the cost of housing down? A simple question.
That's okay. Because I'm a housing lawyer, I could probably spend one whole hour just talking about this question. But I did support SB 79 as ended up being amended at the end to include those anti-displacement protections and deeper affordability. I think that's important to me as we're building housing that we are including affordable housing in that. And ultimately, I did put out a statement on this, which is, available. I think transit-oriented development is good community planning. I was disappointed to see some of the bad faith arguments that were lodged against SB 79 by our council member. For example, SB 79 didn't apply to the Palisades at all, and a lot of the people opposing it were saying they were worried about densification and emergency and evacuation routes. And I thought the conversation was not actually, it was really misinformed. And if there was a council member like me that was informing the public about what actually SB 79 did, maybe people wouldn't have been so afraid of it. Because when I talk about transit-oriented development, I mean, that's what we have. That's what creates walkable communities. We want density that supports our small businesses. We want traffic calming measures so that our streets are safer for our children. Like my kids, I want them to be able to bike and walk in their neighborhood, where we have greenery and shading. And that's what I see that's what I think of when I think of SB 79 and what it's trying to accomplish. And I don't think the city of Los Angeles should be fighting it. We should implement it. And so as council member, I would be working to implement it. On on other issues, I mean, second question is how would you solve the housing affordability crisis in LA? And I think the number one thing we have to do is to build more housing here. And in order to build more housing, we have to change our zoning rules to allow for more dense housing. And that means on the west side. So, and every area of the city needs to be able to be building that housing. People here are sometimes afraid of really big buildings, but I think we need to demystify that. As with like SB 79, it doesn't have to be, it's not a giant apartment building. We have those 3, 4 story buildings, courtyard apartments, those exist already on the west side. And that'll help drive down the cost of the housing. And and I think ultimately, and we need to be pairing it with tenant protections. I'm a tenants rights lawyer, and so thinking about making sure people can remain here on the west side is still really important because we have a lot of rent stabilized housing on the west side here. That is the reason people can afford to live here, and I do not want to see the loss of those affordable units either. And I think we can accomplish all of these things together. And so I really don't see any of these policy mechanisms as fighting against each other. This is what we have to do. And so as council member, I'm very proudly going to be a very pro housing council member. I'm very proud to have the endorsement of Abundant Housing LA. And we are going to be putting out a broader, more detailed housing platform soon, which has been in collaboration with many housing groups.
Thank you. Um, so we started Venice Boulevard for All, an initiative. It was our very first initiative actually in 2019 to make Venice Boulevard LA's first complete street between the ocean and downtown LA. Fun fact, it's the only major street that goes from the ocean to downtown that's entirely in the city of Los Angeles. In 2023, we celebrated with LADOT and Metro when 3 miles of Venice Boulevard was converted to the first 24/7 bus lanes outside of downtown LA, and door zone bike lanes were changed to protected bike lanes. However, the project is installed in CD 11, and there's been no progress to extend this treatment further west of Mar Vista to the beach. As council member, would you support extending the dedicated bus lane to Lincoln and the protected bike lanes to connect to the beach bike path? And would you support these things even if they came at the expense of removing a vehicle travel lane or street parking?
Very loaded question from Streets for All. Um, I live off of Venice Boulevard. I live on the part of Venice Boulevard that does not have the protected bike lane. And I wish it did because I wish that we could I could get on the bike with my kids and we could bike all the way down to the beach. And so I greatly support the project for Boulevard for All. I love that it is it's entirely in the city of Los Angeles from downtown to the beach, and it should be a complete street. It should be safe street. And my favorite part, I mean, when I was talking about kind of like the walkable, dense community, I was talking about Mar Vista, that section of Mar Vista actually, that was so controversial for Councilmember Bonin at the time. And to put in the bus lane, the bike lane. But since talking to people that live in Mar Vista now that oppose that project, they have told me they now like the project. And I think that's really interesting. And it shows that, even when sometimes something is unpopular and you know it's the right thing to do, that these types of investments are the right thing to do because they are good for the planet, good for people. And now people have told me that they love going to Mar Vista because it's walkable. And I think it's because of this street. And so that's why I think we should not be afraid to continue it down to the beach. And as a resident of that neighborhood, I would like to see it. And I think we need to figure out a way to move forward.
Thank you. Over to you, Josh.
All right, so this is a question about Waymos and other autonomous vehicles, which are increasingly appearing all over. I live in
Josh,
K-Town.
sorry,
Can
I
you hear
think
me?
you're on the wrong question. Number 6.
Did I skip ahead?
You did.
I skipped to a different automated question. That's right.
Yes.
All right, this is about automated enforcement. Automated traffic enforcement can both increase the enforcement of our laws and decrease unwanted interactions with armed police officers doing routine traffic stops. In the past few years, California has legalized speed cameras, which the city is in the process of implementing, and refined red light cameras to make them work better for cities. There is also a proposal to legalize noise cameras, which would likely ticket illegal loud exhaust noise from cars. What is your opinion of this trend of automated enforcement? Do you support cameras as a better way to enforce traffic laws? And if not, how do you suggest we clamp down on drivers that speed, run red lights, and or disturb the peace with illegal loud exhaust?
So I do support speed cameras and automated enforcement. I think we have to be really careful, especially in this era with big tech, about surveillance mechanisms and sharing of information with immigration enforcement or beyond what the purpose they're serving. And I know, for example, Councilmember Park has been putting forward automated license plate readers using flock cameras that do that data sharing. And so I think we just have to be really careful. But I do think that um, in terms of traffic enforcement, it is a thing we should be looking at. And we don't want people to be parking in bike lanes or bus lanes. And I think that enforcement is really important for our traffic safety laws.
Thank you. Over to you, Michael.
Thanks, Josh. So, congestion pricing went live in Manhattan, New York last year, and the results have been promising. There have been 11% fewer crashes within the congestion zone and 7.5% fewer cars entering the zone. It's also raising billions of dollars that will go towards improving public transportation. Metro Los Angeles has been studying congestion pricing for years, and one of the most promising cordons is the area surrounding downtown LA. Downtown is the most transit-connected part of our region, and it makes sense to discourage cars driving to and from downtown and encourage more public transportation use. The question is, what do you think of congestion pricing? Do you support it? And if so, would you consider supporting congestion pricing at LAX for cars that enter the horseshoe once the people mover is open?
Yeah, I do support congestion pricing. I mentioned I work for the New York City Council, and I used to work as a transportation legislative attorney, and I worked there from 2014 to 2017. And one of the issues and hot topics at the time was congestion pricing in New York City. They ended up implementing it in 2019, 2 years after I left, but it was a very exciting thing that everybody was trying to move forward. At the time, people were bringing up all sorts of arguments to counter it because they were, one thing we kept hearing repeatedly was it would, negatively be an inequitable impact on working people and lower income people. I think they figured out a way to make it less burdensome, financially burdensome. So I think it is something important that we have to integrate. But overall, I mean, the numbers speak for itself. It has lowered congestion into the core of Manhattan. It has increased revenue and it is working as a policy. And so I'm glad to see Los Angeles studying it for here. I think you're right that it is more ready to implement in downtown because of all the transit options. I am interested in talking more about it for LAX as well. I do think something you hear from the Westchester community all the time is that there's a lot of traffic congestion there, noise pollution, other types of pollution. And we want to, now that we have created the Metro Transit Center there, we want to encourage people to take public transit to LAX and use the people mover. And so I think congestion pricing could be a way that we encourage the transit use and also raise revenue that could benefit our West Side communities. And I'm really interested in talking about it. And I do think we're more ready in downtown, but I'm certainly not afraid of talking about it for the West Side.
Thanks. Over to you, Josh.
Great. All right. This is a question I thought I was asking just a moment ago. So Waymos are all over Los Angeles and becoming increasingly popular. I personally have concerns about how they're going to increase vehicle miles traveled and potentially further privatize our public spaces. But I'm also excited as someone that walks and bikes on our streets about how they feel safer to me personally and other people I know. I think they don't get angry at you, they don't get impatient, they don't get distracted, and they don't speed. And I think council members are probably going to have to make some important votes about autonomous vehicles in our streets over the next couple of years. According to recent data, Waymos see 92% fewer crashes and result in injuries and 96% fewer crashes that just crashes overall. Because cars are so much safer for pedestrians and cyclists, and they don't speed, and they don't get distracted, and they don't get impatient. What do you think of driverless cars, and do you support their expansion in Los Angeles?
Yeah, I agree with all the sentiments that you're raising and the arguments that you've brought up. I do think that they have added cars to the road. Actually, there are the Waymo parking lots near my kid's school, and it is very strange. I wish that those parking lots were not parking lots for Waymos. They were housing personally in Santa Monica. But I think that they are adding more cars to the road when we don't want more cars on the road. Just like with Uber and Lyft at the time when they first came on the road, they were adding cars to the road. They actually weren't decreasing cars. I do think that we need to regulate our make sure that they are regulated to work with our infrastructure. It was interesting to hear the safety stats you're saying. I've definitely witnessed Waymo's kind of cause safety issues on our streets because of the fact that they're not able to like easily navigate our network. So I think that we do need to look at thoughtful regulation of them. Why there could be like a fee we could charge for Waymos to use our streets if they're going to use the wear and tear on our streets. That's a revenue option. I haven't really thought about whether I support their expansion. I think we need to deal with the fleet we have right now. That seems to be, we're still figuring out how it works.
All right, so going back to LAX, they're currently in the early phases of a project that will add over 4 miles of new roadway, and according to their own environmental impact report, induce 50,000 new vehicle miles traveled daily, making traffic and air pollution in Westchester worse. The entire project is predicated on two new terminals, Concourse 0 and Terminal 9, that are now on indefinite hold, And passenger volume is actually down at LAX compared to pre-COVID levels. Of course, all of this is in the context of us spending billions of dollars on a new airport train station and long-delayed people mover. The current council member and the mayor have shown support for this zombie project. My question is, do you support the LAX Roadway Expansion project? And if elected, would you be willing to use your power to pause the project until after the Olympics and reassess then if it's still needed?
Um, I do not think that we should be moving forward with the LAX roadway expansion project. As you said, it is a zombie project for a current scenario we don't have for LAX. And it is very costly. It is increasing vehicle miles traveled. It is increasing, um, congestion for Westchester. And we need to be doubling down and focusing on our transit investments that we already have. Like we were talking about, like our people mover, like our transit center that we've built there. And I think we don't want we don't want a big construction project either during the Olympics, and so I think it's perfectly reasonable to say we should pause it until after and see if it's still needed. We need to see actually the benefit. I have heard concerns from people too about the design of it in terms of pedestrian and bicyclist safety, and we need a more thoughtful review. I don't think advocates fully were able to weigh in on this project. I
Thanks.
should say advocates and community.
Well, most of the outreach was done at the height of COVID, so
That's
people
right.
were occupied. Over to you, Josh. You're on mute.
Thanks. This is a question about parking. The city of Los Angeles is estimated to have approximately 4 parking spaces for every housing unit. New underground parking costs $70,000 per space to build, while structured parking costs $50,000 per space to build. Getting rid of parking minimums would decrease the cost of housing in Los Angeles. Do you support getting rid of parking minimums to help lower the cost of housing? And would you support parking maximums near transit to encourage car light lifestyles near high quality rail and bus routes?
I think in the long run, I do support parking reforms and, eliminating parking minimums and maximums. And also, that is not the future we live in right now. We need to be increasing our transit investments and transit usage. And what I hear in our district too is some of the biggest opposition to housing projects are the complete lack of parking. And I think that this is a hump we need to kind of get over for folks. We need to, do that transition to the transit usage. And so we can then, start pushing for projects that don't need the parking ultimately. I do agree with the math about how it decreases housing costs, and so as a policy, it makes a lot of sense to me. And right now, I think we're just kind of not there yet. And I think the other thing is, housing justice lawyer, I'm always thinking about equity as well, and so we really want to make sure that we are not also overly burdening working class Angelinos, and so. I'm looking forward to, as council member, engaging on this because I know that a lot of housing groups are going to be pushing forward with this while I'm in office.
Thank you. Over to you, Michael.
So in 2015, a woman was killed crossing Vista Del Mar, and the city paid out $9.5 million in a wrongful death lawsuit. In response to this, in 2017, LADOT did a road safety project on the street, which removed a vehicle travel lane in each direction to help slow down cars. Vista Del Mar isn't even on the mobility plan for bike lanes, but they had extra room, and so they added them. There was an NIMBY outcry, mostly from non-LA residents in the South Bay, and ultimately Mayor Garcetti ordered the street restored to its previous dangerous condition over the objections of Councilman Mike Bonin at the time. In 2021, a mother was killed and her child was injured crossing this same street. In 2024, 2 teens were killed. Last year, a woman was killed when 2 cars crashed into each other and one careened off of the street onto the beach bike path where she was walking below. To sum it up, despite many people being killed and injured and millions of dollars paid out of taxpayer dollars in wrongful death lawsuits, the street remains as dangerous as ever. If elected, would you take action and initiate a project to make Vista Del Mar safer, even if it means removing a vehicle travel lane in each direction?
I think we should look at revisiting this project. It's really a shame that it was completely scrapped. And I think one thing I saw when I was reading up about the Vista Del Mar project was that there was interest in maybe putting together a task force. So I think that that would be a great starting point for us if I'm elected to start like talking about it. I know exactly what you're talking about because I've definitely driven this to get to the South Bay. And because it's so adjacent to the coast, as you were saying, people use it for bicycling, and people use it for walking. It's by the beach. We want it to actually be a slower street for our coastline. And so I think I'm in favor of moving forward and reopening the conversation and um, I think it's clearly a really deadly corridor and was also a very controversial project at the time, but I think we have to figure out how to move forward on these important projects.
Thanks. Over to you, Josh.
Thanks. Speaking of controversial projects, we're going to talk about Lincoln Boulevard. Caltrans is the owner of Lincoln Boulevard from Santa Monica Boulevard until the street enters LAX. And they've been studying about 3 miles of bus lanes from Venice Boulevard to Manchester Avenue. And despite the need, this is on a bunch of different maps of transit priority projects for the city, and even metro projects. The projects move super slowly. It's years delayed, and the current council member's position is unclear on supporting it. If elected, would you champion bus-only lanes on Lincoln Boulevard, even if they came at the expense of parking or vehicle travel lane?
So I also live off of Lincoln Boulevard, so I actually am a pedestrian on this part of Lincoln, and it is basically a highway. And I've spoken to small business owners that own businesses along Lincoln Boulevard on this stretch, and they all tell me they wish that the street was more walkable. I mean, you see a lot of businesses come and go because there isn't the foot traffic to sustain it. So speaking of like, housing along transit corridors, this is kind of the key type of street that we should be adding some more housing to support the walkability, slowing the street down a little bit, and increasing just more community. Crossing Lincoln Boulevard is also a total nightmare. I There's not that many places. Um, and there's not that many places, and I have little kids, and so I there's not even beg buttons actually on some of the crossings, and it's totally scary. And so it's very clear that Lincoln Boulevard is so ripe for activation, for more street safety, for more support. I think just like densification, like all of the things. And so I support looking at it. There are a lot of really great businesses along the way, and I think that by adding the bus lanes, that would help. First, it would actually help move some traffic. I've taken the number 3 bus up, and it would be really great if that was a bus lane up. And it would, speaking of connectivity from the airport, you can take the bus up straight to Santa Monica, and then you can connect to the expo. So I think it would be really important for connectivity. I've also spoken to LADOT, and they've told me, right, like one core issue for the west side is our north-south connectivity. And so I literally look at Lincoln Boulevard that way as like creating that north-south connectivity. And so I think, and I also spoke to Councilmember Bubba Fish about Culver City and everything that went on with the bus and bike lanes there. And he told me the same thing. It's always worth it to fight for the best project. And so I think it's something that I personally have experience with, and I would really I think it's so ripe for just love and and I think that putting transit there will really add to it.
Thank you.
How about you, Josh?
All right, this is our last question, and then we're going to move to audience. This is about Venice Dell, a project that you're very familiar with. For everyone else, Venice Dell is a small city-owned parcel near Venice Beach that was supposed to become 140 units of supportive housing. In 2018, thanks to NIMBY backlash, it was reduced to 100 units. Despite the city council approving it and threats from Sacramento, the project is in limbo. Tracy Park, the city attorney, Heidi Feldstein Soto, and the mayor are using millions of taxpayer dollars to fight against a project that has already been approved by the state and by the city. Why is the city fighting against a project that already approved? As council member, how would you handle Venice Dell?
I love this question for me as a last question. So on my housing platform on day one, I am going to unblock housing that our council member has been blocking and letting languish. And that includes Venice Dell. For the past 3 years, she has actively tried to block this project. She campaigned on blocking this project, as you know, and um, and as a result, is now costing us millions of dollars to fight to build the housing that should have already broken ground. And I think that's what taxpayers should be absolutely horrified by because they vote to tax themselves to build affordable housing. And we know we need it on the west side, especially on the west side where we haven't been building that housing. And so that's a day one thing for me. At public council, we learned about what was going on with this project and the fact that our city attorney and council member were blocking it. As soon as they got into office, we tried advocacy and ultimately we had to file a lawsuit against the city that was a fair housing lawsuit and to try to enforce our state fair housing laws. And I stepped away from that case to actually run against Councilmember Park now because I think it's so preposterous that we would block an approved project. The reason they're blocking is because a minority of people do not want affordable housing or permanent supportive housing to be built on that spot. Speaking of precious parking, I've heard at hearings, people say, public meetings, people say, this parking lot is so important to the community. It preserves coastal access. I think one thing that's really important in terms of fact about the project is that it is because of the Coastal Act replacing all of the parking spaces. There's going to be public parking. It's just also going to be housing. And I think the housing actually improves the street. They're keeping the trees. It's going to improve the canal access. And I think all of the arguments that have been brought against the project are misinformed and racialized. And also, I just think some of them are bad faith as well. And so, as a council member, I think leadership is kind of pushing back against some of those erroneous arguments. And so, I'm hoping as a council member that's very pro housing, that knows that we have to do this to use my power to educate people so that we can move forward. And sadly, our current council member does give into the fear mongering arguments and the misinformation. And I think as a result, the West Siders are not getting a fair shake of understanding the benefits of this kind of housing for them.
All right, let's go to audience questions. The first one is on Measure ULA. And just for context for everybody, late last week, Councilmember Rahman introduced a motion to modify, sorry, I should say it differently, to put something on the ballot in June that if voters approve would modify Measure ULA. It would exclude for 15 years multifamily housing, commercial housing. The numbers show that multifamily housing has dropped. And it would also tinker with the formula on the city spending money. ULA has collected over $1 billion, but only $9 million has been spent on affordable housing construction because it's so onerous to spend the money. So this would tweak that. So with that context, the question is, Measure ULA is designed to fund affordable housing, but some argue it has had unintended consequences for new multifamily development and apartment buildings. Are you open to revisiting exemptions and/or adjustments to ensure it does not hinder housing production while maintaining the core of it?
I think the big answer is yes, But I think that this, I think I am concerned when I hear data about our well-intentioned transfer tax impacting development. And I also know that there is kind of disagreement about the data. And so I put out this kind of positioning on ULA before. I want ULA is funding a lot of important tenant protections. We are losing revenue from the federal government, so we need to be really careful about touching our local housing revenue sources. ULA is funding affordable housing development that meets the deepest needs, and so I want to keep preserving ULA revenue to keep doing that. And so before we touch this important revenue source, we really need to know what data we're talking about and make sure it's data led and that it's locally pushed. And so I can appreciate Councilmember Rahman's effort to try to do that local push as opposed to at the state level, which I think would be less considerate of, all of the work that we've done as a housing movement to push for ULA here. And so, I am a little bit concerned about some of the conversations about adding, putting money aside for interim shelter. I disagree with that. We need to build permanent housing with this money, and so I do not want to see that come out of this conversation. But ultimately, I think that this measure is a little bit rushed, so I really want to see us kind of have a thoughtful conversation and move forward after Tuesday on it.
Thanks. The next one is about the Ohio Avenue Bike Lane project. The upcoming Ohio Avenue Bike Lane will be a crucial link in the West Side Bike Network. At the same time, it has taken 5 years so far and will likely take another 1 to 2 years to finally be built. For context, I think it's about 1.5 miles long. What can or will you do as council member to reduce the process burden of projects like this? And I will just say, I'm on the Bicycle Advisory Committee. We were presented with, this is a CD5 project, but a bike lane on Westwood. It's 1 year of construction and 4 years of outreach, design, bringing on a consultant, etc. So they say you should, sharpen your axe for 3 times as long as the actual cut of the tree, but we really do have a process problem in the city of Los Angeles. Things take a long time. What would you do about that?
The process problem?
How long things take? Like for 1.5 miles of Ohio, going back to the question, it's probably going to be about 7 or 8 years from A to Z.
Yeah, I think the Ohio project started under Mike Bonin. And he worked on it for a really long time. And then, he had to get funding for it. And now they've been doing this outreach to try exactly what you're describing for this bike lane. I think this comes to housing too, that we do want to do community input to inform uses and kind of like, I think there are benefits to that kind of outreach. And I also think it ends up sometimes being repetitive. And we kind of tend to see the same, it becomes process for process sake. And so I think the key thing is knowing when. That's kind of the main thing. I am curious to learn more from your experience on the bike commission, kind of when that is. Like, what is enough outreach? What does that look like? What does community input for something like this actually mean? I think that's wild to hear about the timeline for this one bike lane.
Well, we could certainly talk about that. I have opinions about
Happy,
outreach.
happy to.
Next question comes from Colin. Fire and police take up about half of LA City's budget. Is that the right amount? And if not, how should the city rebalance spending to support other programs like transportation projects while still meeting public and fire safety needs?
Yeah, I think that I love the graphs, the pie charts that come out of our controller's office. I think that visual really helps us see this data to see actually how much of our budget, our general fund, is going to police and fire. I do think, there was one moment in the budget fight last year where Councilmember Hernandez was talking about, money for a new helicopter that the LAPD was asking for. We just saw the LAPD ask for hiring over budget recently. even more, even though they were budgeted a certain amount of officers, and they said we're still going to do it anyway, and so the city is just going to hire them. I think that's problematic. I think we do need to be scrutinizing what actually we are spending our police and fire dollars on, and what's creating safety truly in the city. And I think that we need to be looking at our street infrastructure as safety too. It is part of our emergency system. It is part of our safety network. And so those are important investments. And as we were talking about at the very beginning, we want to make sure those should be non-negotiables in our budget. And we can't keep pulling from those things that lead to liability payouts afterwards, while continuing to give to the police and fire. All that being said, we also need to keep, our emergency responsiveness is very important in the budget, as we saw with the Palisades fire. So, gonna try to balance it.
Next question comes from Assad. Venice Beach will be home for some of LA 28 games. What do you anticipate to plan to help local businesses and activities during the games?
I think I think with the games, we need to make sure that they're benefiting uh local residents. That's number one. That's just kind of like an overarching value I have for our Olympics. If they're coming here, it's going to be costly, and we need to make sure the Angelenos benefit. And so, investments that I'm interested in when it comes to the Olympics are public bathrooms, sanitation, investments in transit. And I think those things can actually improve support for our businesses in Venice, actually, because it creates just a more beautiful environment for visitors. And so that's one way I'm thinking of it immediately in response to that question. Um, I think that we're also going to be putting out a small business platform that will be about supporting our small businesses in terms of permitting and fees, and so those are some things I'm going to be working on, and look forward to engaging.
Next question from Andreas. How do you see the role of the neighborhood councils in CD11, and how do you plan to reach out to them?
So I think that the idea behind neighborhood councils is really important, that residents should get an input into what's happening in their city. And residents also on a neighborhood level know most directly some of the things happening. And so I see why they were created. I also see that neighborhood councils tend to only allow in some voices, and that's the main concern, is that who speaks through the neighborhood council and whose voices are represented is a really important question we need to revisit to make sure our neighborhood councils are fully reflecting the full needs of the community, as opposed to some interests of the people that can attend and participate. I'm interested in figuring out how we create more inclusivity and accessibility for our neighborhood councils, and how they do their input with the city council. And I'm also interested in other types of commissions. You're on the bike commission. I do think like we could have a youth commission. We should be having other types of convened opportunities for people to do input in government.
I don't know if
I
it's
like
possible to
sorry.
go ahead. Didn't mean to
I was
cut you
gonna
off.
say I like what was just said in the chat too about shade infrastructure, just as an aside.
Thank you, Megan. She's always been great in Culver City working on shade.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if it's possible to answer this in a minute, but how do you view your being council member? What would be so different compared to the current council member?
I I think I think I can answer it in 1 minute. I think uh our current council member's record is one of opposition to a lot of things. Um Opposition to our budget last year, opposition to housing, opposition to raising wages, opposition to our sanctuary city status. And it feels very calcified. And I want Council District 11 to move into the future. And I want us to be pushing for the investments we know we need. I want us to be pushing for the housing we know we need. I want us to push for the transit investments we know we need. And it's really hard to sometimes, I think always the question is like, how do you pay for all of it? I think we have to figure that out together, but I think that um, we must actually like manifest this future this future with all these investments because I think that's the only way forward. And so there's just really stark difference between us in that way. And I think our record also is just in stark difference in terms of what we have fought for.
Last audience question, and then we'll go to closing. I thought it was nice to end on this. What do you love most about CD 11 on the West Side? What should the rest of the city know about these communities?
I love this. This is a great ending question. I think we were thinking about kind of my why of running, and I mentioned that my family uh, I was born and raised here. My family immigrated to Los Angeles in the 1970s. They are immigrants from Pakistan and Burma. My mom is Indian Burmese, and my grandparents' house was in Hawthorne for my entire childhood. Some of my family members lived in Culver City. They lived in Westchester. They worked at the airport. My grandmother owned a corner grocery store. They were just very rooted here around the West Side and in the South Bay. And I think when I think of that story, I think that what gets left behind in the stereotype of the West Side as a wealthy white community is that there are a lot of diverse communities here. There are a lot of diverse immigrant communities that have created the culture here, that have lived here for a really long time. A Mexican community, a Black community, a Oaxacan community, Persian community, Japanese community, Indian immigrants like my family, and we have a public housing community here at Mar Vista Gardens. We have these like beautiful pockets of our West Side, and that's the West Side that I feel like we need to go back to. And that's the nostalgia I have for our West Side. And so for me, it's the diversity of the West Side is what I love. And I want to celebrate and I want us to go back to and why we fight for building affordable housing here because we want to preserve that diversity here. We need to make this a place where everybody can live.
Thank you. Well, I don't know if that was your closing statement. That was a very nice answer, but if you would like to make a closing statement, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you all for having me here. I love opportunities like this to kind of engage and practice, uh, you answer tough policy questions, and dig into the nuance. I am a policy wonk. I like to really dig into the details. And so that's, I think, what I'm kind of presenting as a council member. I think as a council member, I view myself as, I want transformative change for our city, and also we have to be pragmatic about it. And I want to put forward actual concrete things. I care about materially improving the quality of life for all Angelenos. And I think some people might say that's, whatever stereotypes are being said about me. But I think that the things that I'm fighting for that I've spoken about are very basic needs for everybody in the city of Los Angeles. I think what Streets for All does is advocate for that, improving our transit system for everybody, our transportation system for everybody, street safety for everybody. And so I, look forward to your partnership when I get elected and when I win.
Thank you. Well, thanks so much for the time. Thank you, everybody, for attending. The last thing I want to remind everybody is this Thursday, we have a mobility debate for candidates running for CD3, and that will be at 5:30 via Zoom. As usual, the information is on our website. Faizah, thank you so much for your time, and good luck and good night, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.